Welcome back to the Mythic Dungeon Invitational All-Stars here at BlizzCon. I'm Robert Bones Malone Wing, and I'm joined by, it's a legitimate thing, okay? I'm contenders, and it's a thing now. It says it on the lower third sometimes. And I'm joined by the Future Crew once again, and we come now to our second series of the day as we've been hyping it up, the Method Bowl, and the Mythic Dungeon Invitational program is still young, right? This is the closing out of year 2, but Method, certainly an organization that is no stranger to this program. We've seen a lot of them. They've been a part of the young history thus far, and it's exciting that we get to come to this event now where we have 2 teams. You know, these are teams who we saw at the Global Final performed very well, and both of them obviously eager to kind of start off Battle for Azeroth on the right foot. Nagura, you know, as you've watched both of these teams, just from what we saw at the Global Final, do you think there's anyone with a clear edge, or that it's just too even a call?
I think at the Global Finals, I was actually a little bit surprised by Method NA. I thought they would actually do worse.
Of course, from Europe, sure. Go ahead, Nagura, sure.
No, I think it's because they have this more laid-back mindset coming in, that they don't practice too much. While on the other hand, we had Method PogChamp, who are known to practice a lot. I think they're one team that practiced the most for Global Finals and Regionals, and now as well for the BlizzCon here. So I think that PogChamp might win, but then at the Global Finals we saw Method NA just being in the upper bracket the whole time, only losing in the final, so they have something, right?
Yeah, that is interesting, you know, for Method NA. They might have been looking to get to the end of this bracket and have that rematch, have that throwdown, and throw Excel's Angels kind of off the mountain there and say, hey, we are the best team. They no longer have that opportunity, but they still have the opportunity there to win. And you bring up an interesting point, Jack. I want to run it by you now. Obviously, you're playing a lot. People are watching your stream all the time. You're constantly doing these high-level dungeons. Do you think that there's a certain point where maybe too much practice maybe takes away from what you're doing? Or do you think there's maybe some validity in Method NA's approach of less is more?
I think a lot of times they're kind of hyping up that they don't practice, at least from a hard practice perspective, where we're saying we're just doing these dungeons for competition. But more often than not, they're just always playing together. They're always doing something together, and I think that goes a really long way, going from all of 2018, you know, becoming very well known for just being this top-level group running on NA servers, completing really high keys. So while they may not have had a ton of practice going into this event specifically, they have so much familiarity with each other, and they've consistently shown with 3 different tanks, really, in Shakib and E-Man and now with Reva Fevi, that they can be such a versatile group no matter who is kind of leading the charge and tanking for them.
Yeah, certainly something that is an advantage for them, having that distribution of people they play with. But taking a look now at the map pool, we're going to be kicking things off with Temple of Sethraliss, going into Freehold, and if necessary, King's Arrest. You know, Ted, what are you seeing in these maps?
This is a really nasty first map. They were not nice to the Method Bowl. Because we're starting, I mean, Temple itself, not the toughest dungeon in the world, but we are in a bolstering explosive environment. And everybody's going to groan in the audience now that plays this key on live. We just had an explosive week on live. We know how nasty it is on the last boss, having the Hexer spawn explosives all over the map. So a lot of attention is going to need to come out of these teams for the explosives.
Overcoming adversity, I think we could say that's the Method way. Nagura, what do you take? Do you share Ted's kind of opinion on that situation? Do you think that's going to be very brutal for them to deal with?
I think the difference in affixes between the first map and the second map is also going to show in the team comps probably. As we've seen in the first match, we've seen all the rogues and the demon hunters coming in because they can do those big pulls and they don't have the bolstering or the explosives to prevent them from doing those big pulls. But now, Method NA versus Method PogChamp, we have explosive and we have bolstering in those first 2 matches. So we might see something different coming in, smaller pulls, maybe more control pulls from them.
Yeah, when I did have a chance to talk to Elserat, you know, saw him at the Hilton, and we were kind of discussing what the game plan is for them. You know, he was saying they're not looking to get too crazy. Again, this is a new expansion. These are new dungeons. These are situations where maybe you want to be a little more slow and steady-minded, and that's kind of what they're looking to do. And it was hard for me to get a read specifically on how crazy Method NA was looking to go, because they've kind of just been so playfully flippant about their style, and I don't know exactly what they're going to be looking to do with these dungeons.
Well, I would say nobody on Method NA is more playfully flippant, as you would put it, as Rev here in the tanking role, and he's somebody who's just been a hyper-aggressive player, and that's something that he's just so used to being able to have as large a pulls as possible. So I don't think that Method NA is going to shy away from that at all. They want to be able to actually do whatever they can to get ahead and get those extra little advantages when possible.
Changing topics just a little bit now, I had a chance to talk to Derry a little bit earlier, general manager for the Method organization, and asked her what it meant you know, to have these two teams here, these two teams competing after the global finals. And she was saying that for Method, it really means the world to them to be able to come in, support the competitive PvE scene, have these teams that are regularly streaming, regularly involved, creating educational content for the community. And really the whole organization is just incredibly proud to be here at an event like this. And, you know, frankly, it's awesome to see. As we said, young history for MDI, but this is an organization that's out there, and they're getting involved in the very early stages of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's great, and it's really encouraging other people to sponsor. We see now Excel's Angels moving up from Shell's Angels, and it's just, Method is just such a strong presence in PvP and in PvE, and it's just great to see them here.
Yeah, and certainly they would love to have success there. You see JB. JB's another player who I haven't had a chance to talk to at this event. I had a chance to talk to him a lot in Ohio. I've been watching his streams. His style is, it's difficult to see how intense he takes some of these things, how intensely, because his demeanor is so laid back.
He is a very chill
Yeah.
dude, but it's also very hard to focus talking to him a lot of the time because the buttons on the shirt just keep opening up as you're talking to him. And it's just so distracting.
Yeah, it is true. When you're watching his stream, he looks like a guy who's like moved to Hawaii, and what he does is just he's relaxing, he's got a drink, and he's just, you know, casually enjoying some PvE.
I think all of those players are passionate. As for example, Team PogChamp, Method PogChamp. I've talked to them a couple of times, also when we were out drinking, and I just saw them like standing there in a circle, talking about WoW, talking about their strategies, and talking about their big games. So they're just very invested and very passionate about this.
Nigger, I'm going to assume that was drinking water, and then we're going to get the team compositions here. Taking a look there now, no double rogue, but we are seeing the mirror rogue, not same spec obviously, but we're seeing the mirror rogues and then the demon hunters coming out. Jack, what stands out to you about these compositions?
I'm very interested to see Eldrad be playing Disc for this. I know he'd been practicing between Mistweaver and Disc Priest a lot of times on live servers, and early on when they were pushing keys, I know he has a lot of experience with Mistweaver and as well Druid from raiding. So I'm kind of surprised to be able to see him pull out Disc here. I was kind of expecting it to be a move for Freehold, but maybe they're going to have some other comp switches as they move into that, and they're going to need him on Disc full time throughout this run.
That actually came up in our conversation in the Hilton, that you were going to be judging him and his Disc play, and so he laughingly, so I'm not sure how serious this was, but he laughingly said, you know, he's going to try to do a good job, Jack, and not disappoint you on that Disc Priest. Otherwise there, yeah, nothing too crazy, I would imagine. Dr. J, Mage, I mean, name a more iconic MDI duo.
Dr. J, Mage, JB, Druid, Marv, Locke, you know, the consistencies.
All of these things are almost more shocking than the double blood DK.
I was going to say, it's kind of what you would expect. Maybe the Disc Priest kind of being the really like, was this going to happen point, but it certainly, you know, for as much as he's been talking about playing Disc Priest, it certainly makes sense we're going to see it.
We also see like the Warlock for the first time here in this tournament. So we might see some interesting things coming out with the gateways. We've seen in the global finals or last in Legion, Warlock was very famous. Everyone pretty much had a Warlock because of the utility, because of the gateway, because of the Soulstone, Healthstone, and so on. And now we see one Warlock with Method and A, so maybe we can see some special strats coming out of them.
All right, taking a look at the poll results, I feel like every time we see it, these teams are pretty evenly split, but you know, I like to just chalk this up to, again, the number of European players in Twitch chat right now, MPG, Method, PogChamp, slight edge in the poll results for what those matter.
Yeah, and I mean, Method NA, though, has been doubted in the past. They were looked at as, you know, the second Method team going into the global lands, and then they just were riding it high, and they were winning every single game onto the way to the grand finals, right? So, at least from my perspective, I'm looking at Method NA to see if they can take this.
Well, as the only NA member of this desk, because you two are traders, Lord Overton, the siren song of European rating and Mythic Dungeon, I have to stand by my NA compatriots, but I assume you all are firmly in the PogChamp camp?
I'll go with Method NA.
PogChamp camp.
I'll go with Method NA on this one. I think the consistency that we've seen out of, you know, the Method NA team, for one, is a huge asset for them, and as well as going into it with Rev, who has had really a great storied past in the Mythic Dungeon Invitational, where going into this year's tournament, his team didn't qualify. He got picked up by Dark Slashers. They were a game away from going to LAN, didn't quite make it there, and now he's here at BlizzCon, you know.
The portrait meta for these two teams, certainly I'm missing the Marv holding up the one finger, but JB has definitely upgraded with the thinking face. Let's go ahead and kick things off. We're traveling to the temple. Gentlemen, take it away.
Hi, Jack.
Hello, Sloot.
Temple of Sethraliss with bolstering, explosive, and of course infested. We're in a fortified environment here, folks. Explosive for those at home. We do have mobs that periodically spawn large explosive orbs that will do a 50% of max HP to the team if they don't destroy it in time. Both teams starting right away, mass stealthing to that first boss's room and getting ready to pull right away. Want to make sure they have that bloodlust with 2 and 3 minute cities lined up right away. Method NA going right in there, making sure they don't get too close to the trash on the side. Now, there is a rogue that patrols near the boss area here. If they pull that by accident, they cannot kill it, otherwise it will bolster the boss.
Yep, very important. They have to always watch out for that. As you're seeing Marv kind of digging himself into the corner here, so it'll be away from the kiting path of that mob. As you know, we are in that fortified setting, so you are seeing Adderus going down very quickly here. Very important to watch out for on this boss. You're going to have a lightning shield which gets traded off on between the two mobs here, so you can focus down Adderus first. The lightning shield flips is on Aspects and will deal a ton of damage if you start attacking Aspects. Then after a while, the lightning shield will flip to Adderus, and then you have to switch targets.
PogChamp just now finishing up some of the trash and now moving on to the boss. Likely don't have access to all of their 2 and 3 minute CDs because they did have to clean up that trash. Then again, they could have saved them just waiting for that bloodlust. Nonetheless, a bit behind, at least in terms of the boss progression here versus Method NA, but they do have a small advantage with that trash that they just had to clear out. Aspects now going rapidly down for Method NA, 25%. After this, they are able to skip all of the trash in this room if they want, just by hugging the right side as they go into the hallway. So we'll see if they opt to kill anything in here.
Oh, you are seeing the cheat death going up on the side of Muscle Bra there. You have to watch out for that really hard Cyclone Strike into the Static Shock combo that can just deal a ton of damage. So I'm not sure if Muscle Bra was high enough HP or just wasn't standing in the barrier to be able to help mitigate some of that extra damage there. But they are getting Adderus down, and they are just able to finish off Aspects as Method NA here is working on crossing the bridge here, getting some of these mobs down early.
So Method NA, yeah, pulling some of the trash that we already saw Method PogChamp deal with. Method PogChamp just now working on Aspects. The brother Snake has fallen, now at 50%. After this, I do assume that they're kind of just going to get into that hallway with that Grog Rider. Not sure if they're going to pull the 3-pack next to it. We'll have to see. There is a lot of skippable trash in this dungeon, especially because some of it is just defaulted with the orb, or eye, as some people call it, gauntlet that we'll see later.
Yeah, and they always have the advantage there where they're able to just take their time, skip a lot, and be able to start making it up later on. And they're also able to take advantage of that buff near the end of the boss fight for the final boss, where just giving you that increased damage. If they remain in combat, they can still have that buff as they're clearing up the rest of the trash.
Jack, there you go. Elstrad putting up some solid DPS numbers on the board for them. Aspects does now fall just a moment here. There we go for Method PogChamp. We'll see exactly what kind of trash they want to deal with. We did see them pull some trash as the boss was dying, making sure that they kill the boss prior to the trash, so we ignore a lot of that bolster. Really clever play from them there. The path, or the bridge here, is now open to them. Want to make sure you avoid these swirlies, the spears. They do a ton of damage and punt you back as well.
We could certainly ask Tegu about that one. Now, as you see PogChamp, of course, crossing the bridge, they always have to be watching out for, of course, that Crawlus Rider's Noxious Breath here, which looks like it will get a little bit of damage out on the Sebs. But again, they're just walking ahead. They're making sure that they can start getting past the bridge, getting away from any of the spears that are dropping down. And it can take so long to be able to actually kill it, get rid of it, and deal with it. You are seeing Muscle Bra actually moving on ahead, so you probably see out of their team just shadow melding, maybe just using the Viz Pod to be able to just skip past all this extra trash and start moving on to Merekthar's room.
Pretty typical to skip this trash and just kind of slither by it. They do get over to the second boss's room here. A lot of dangerous trash moving up here, and you do need to kill everything in this room for the second boss to spawn, namely the tenders. You know, Jack, you and I love some tendies.
I would love
now,
some
if you miss the interrupts on their heal, it will AoE heal everything around them, so it's quite crucial. They don't have access to some of the substantial AoE silences like a Boomkin or the Vengeance Demon Hunter here, so they have to be really spot on with that middle 3-pack.
Yeah, and at this point, they're just making sure they're getting a good setup, because there are so many mobs patrolling all around, so not only having to make sure they're getting the interrupts on the tenders they're wanting to pull, making sure avoiding any of the other infested that they're going to be seeing on the side, because they do have to clear out this entire room before they're able to get Merektha to spawn.
So a bit of a hiccup there from Method NA, just kind of taking their time, making sure they skip everything they need to skip, just wanting to make sure the patrols there. They actually end up pulling the trash, presumably on purpose, as the team was just kind of waiting there, and that somebody seemed to have tagged it. Muscle Bra does go down. We saw that cheat death proc earlier, and we have 3 deaths over on Method NA side on the left right now. It looks like it is a death skip, though, if I'm not mistaken. They stealth pass, something we typically saw in Legion. You kind of have anybody who can stealth successfully move past, anybody who can't will die, and they will res them.
The disaster situation is that JB actually got caught out by that Crawlus Rider, and they wasn't actually able to get the mass res off for everybody else. And he's just going to be able to, he's just going to have to die here, run back, stealth all the way back, because he just I guess wasn't watching for the Crawlish Rider.
That is a huge time dump right there. So JB, exactly as you said, does release. He's running back in Kitty stealth form as quickly as he can. The rest of the team stays dead to make sure that they have, that they don't, I mean, they can't get past the trash, actually. They don't have the mass stealth, so they just have to wait there for that mass res. Meanwhile, PogChamp on the right side is moving well through this room. They did have the hiccup with the Muscle Broad Death. They used their battle res, but they are now stable.
They're stable here. They're making sure they're getting the rest of the trash cleared out here, but also JB's having some problems being able to get past a lot of this trash. You do have to watch for, I believe it's the Rogue who's able to see through the stealth, so being able to actually get around it, not pulling into any other mobs. So it looks like it was just kind of the route that he was taking was crossing into that of that Rogue, and they caught him out of stealth.
I actually don't even think they see stealth. I think he just ran a bit too close to it, and it just saw him. Yeah, you know, I mean, you have to kind of make them face away that he doesn't have the distract from the Rogue to support him there. So bit of trouble over on the Method NA side. JB does release again. He'll try a second round of stealth to make sure that he gets back to his team for that mass res. PogChamp, once again, just steadily moving through the room here. Nothing too crazy in terms of the pulls. They want to make sure that they keep these explosives under control. A couple of Gahuni spawn right now, and they make sure to kill them off before they reach the middle of the room.
Yeah, working on killing them off here. You're seeing JB again, trying again, getting back to the rest of his group, being able to have that mass res there. They just you have to have that awareness, and maybe it is some of the on-stage jitters that kind of getting to them as they're watching out for the other Crawlish Rider.
So this time, Dark did actually die as well to come and support JB with some of the stealth distracts and saps as well to make sure that they can safely get back. So this time it should be guaranteed on the way back. PogChamp dealing, if I'm not mistaken, with the last of the trash here, waiting for that second boss to spawn in a moment.
Yeah, they always have to be making sure they're getting stacked up together to be able to deal with Marek there. It would be very nice to be able to have a number of different stuns, even using Fear, for example, to be able to deal with that Knot of Snakes stun that goes out onto other players. They do have to deal with this last central pull of all the tenders, and like you said earlier, having the strong interrupts to be able to make sure they're shutting down any of these guys, especially getting the stuns out for the drains whenever they try to drain the egg and gain that damage buff.
Yeah, so these three particularly actually do start with that damage buff, something that the mages can spell steal, but I believe this time it actually translates into a CDR, a cooldown reduction buff rather than damage buff. We see them running over, casting Drain. Great AoE stun. They really worked well here to control the health of the tenders and make sure that they're draining at the same time, so they use that AoE stun for all of them. Finally, Method and A get back up on the horse. Everybody is rezzed, and they're starting to work on the second boss room, but I mean, they got their work cut out for them here, Jack.
Indeed they do. As PogChamp here just pulling into Marekta, there's me about a 3-phase fight that you have to always watch out for. First phase, you do have to watch out for that Noxious Breath, which would be just facing one player and just dumping any of the goo all over the room. Then there will be any of the goo that's placed on specific players, and along with a Knot of Snakes that happens. So having everybody stacked up together, being able to have a quick stun as you're seeing out of the side of Shella, to be able to quickly get rid of that Knot of Snakes, get people out of any of the goo on the ground, and be able to get all of these snakes in together as you go into that intermission phase.
A Knot and a lot of snakes on this fight. The second boss phase here, once they do come back up, will actually only consist of turning around from the boss, making sure that you don't get blinded. None of this frontal breath. The Knot still will occur. Lots of ways to get them out. Stuns, you can DPS them out. Fears, in caps work on them as well. So nothing too tough for this team, especially in this fortified environment. Not too dangerous of a boss. Method and A still working to chew through that room. At this point, they gotta know that they're behind, so we're probably gonna see some riskier pulls coming out of them to try and catch up. As Method PogChamp just taking a very chill, slow-paced approach to the dungeon right now and just rocking it.
Yeah, and at this point, you're not really able to pull any extra trash into the boss, as we've seen with so many other parts of the MDI, and what it, Sub-Rogue, for example, has been so well known for throughout, Legion and, as we're seeing recently with BFA. So at this point, they just have to be able to deal with it. A lot of the strikers here are a lot more annoying than the first set that you have to deal with, because of the dust clouds that are coming out. So constantly kiting them away from those dust clouds to be able to actually able to hit them always is going to be so important for the group.
Yeah, situation where you don't want to leave them in the dust there. We do see the cheat death proc for Dark there. Not going to have that available. Similar situation to Muscle Bra when he got caught out without his cheat death available, and that's where the death occurred earlier. Now, they do still have the battle res available for Method and A, because, I mean, there was just no point battle resing at that point. There was no one available to do it for them, as JB had kind of that struggle running back, but they are doing a pretty substantial pull in the middle of the room there, making sure that they're catching up as much as possible. Really have to babysit those explosive. PogChamp just now downing Marekta, and we'll be moving forward to the third boss. And of course, the good old Mario Lightning Gauntlet.
Now the real challenge for both of these teams is going to be that Lightning Ball Gauntlet, to be making sure they're not getting it knocked back past it. You have to deal with a couple of these agitated Nimbus really quickly, making sure they're getting those interrupts. And you also will have the Mage Spell Seal, which I know Dr. J is always going to be a big fan of, to be able to get a little bit extra damage out. And if they are holding those charges, they'll be able to release them and do a ton of damage. So always important to get either a Purge or a Spell Steal to be able to get rid of them very quickly.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, it's a 100% damage buff per stack to those Nimbuses, so making sure to get rid of those or spell steal them either way, or just interrupt them flat out. Don't want too much damage on the group. Now, bit of an advantage here for the team with the Warlock once Method NA gets there. You can actually plant a Warlock portal on the side of this first kind of electric gauntlet, making sure that none of the players suffer, as we've seen oftentimes, Jack, through the gauntlet. Anytime you
look who's talking here.
Anytime you get hit by one of the balls that you see here, you will actually get shocked for a fair bit of damage and put back towards the starting area. So all eyes on the players as they very slowly. Hey!
There we go.
We have our first successful electric gauntlet at BlizzCon. They move through, get some CCs up on the infested mob, want to get their percent here before working to spawn the third boss of the dungeon.
Yeah, but great job here by PogChamp getting through the lightning gauntlet. Let's make sure we keep an eye on Method NA as they have to do the same soon after.
We do see Bloodlust coming up in 10 seconds for Method PogChamp. Certainly the boss you want to have it for coming up. It is ruthless. Even in this fortified setting, even with the slip-ups you might have, if you let all of that electricity and energy go to the boss, the third boss coming up, it is quite a bit of damage on the group, Jack.
It's extremely unforgiving as well. It only takes, you know, probably half of a pillar really to charge up the boss to full energy and have it put out a huge nuke onto everybody. They do a barrier as well to be able to deal with it, but we'll likely start seeing, you know, about 2 or 3 groups to be able to rotate through soaking here. A lot of times we've had just the tank, for example, will solo 1 pillar, and then you have 1 range, 1 melee grouped up together to be able to soak half of a pillar each.
So they deal with the infested mob now. They grip it up. Now, that mob was not in combat. If you sap something or just completely incap it without getting in combat, it will not get any pulsar stacks. It will not aggro once it falls out of the CC. Now, they did grip it upwards there, so I'm not sure if it's going to aggro on them just a bit later, but all of the mobs you see here in this room are required to spawn the third boss.
Really heavy damage going to be going out here. Elzrat doing an excellent job being able to prepare for it as Rapture is going up. They need to watch for that explosive out way in the back. The Shadow doing an excellent job jumping out of the group, getting on top of it, destroying it as rapidly as they can. They are seeing the barriers going down, help mitigate a lot of this damage. They don't have a ton of area to be able to move around in. As you see, you know, they even have to step out of the barrier sometimes to avoid some of the damage coming out from these dervishes. So very great job. Be able to have that extra little control here to be taking down the mobs very quickly. Right,
you are, Jack. Those dervishes do actually blink to their highest aggro target. In this case, of course, should be the tank with that little kind of AoE lightning on the ground. Want to make sure you move that, but a lot of residual nature damage on the group as well. Not really very heavy tank damage. Saving that infested for last. If I'm not mistaken, they're going to pull the infested from up the stairs, exactly the one that they gripped earlier. It will blink over to Sebs, the tank. He has aggro on it. They want to combine them together again. Infested mobs do not kill each other, so it's often very efficient to pull as many as you can together, kill them at about an even pace to make sure that you can kill all the Gahoonies after that.
Yeah, and at this point, you know, once those mobs do end up dying, then you'll be able to actually spawn a Galvat's, the third boss here. So the most efficient that they can be, and a lot of times you don't have as wide of a choice in this dungeon, for example, compared to like a Talvasar, where we're seeing a wide variety of pulls that were going out there. So they're doing a great job of following that more linear route they're going to be used to. It'd be very interesting to be able to see, you know, not only how they're dealing with Galvas, but also just as they have to deal with the eyeballs at the end, making sure they're getting them slotted up into the head of the snake and moving on to the final boss here.
A Method and just clawing back as quickly as they can, pulling all the trash together right before the gauntlet. Hopefully Marv does use that portal on the side to give them a small advantage, but the third boss has been engaged by Method PogChamp here. Name of the game here is you want to make sure that you're intercepting the electric beam from the pillar going towards the boss every time they spawn. You need about a 3-man rotation, sometimes 4 depending on the spawn frequency a bit earlier into the fight, but any of the beams that hit the boss, as we alluded to earlier, will charge energy up, and if he reaches 100 energy, will AoE the room.
Yeah, at this point, everyone's staying very tightly packed in together and controlling different quadrants. You're seeing Elzrat's now popping in to be able to deal with one of the spires that has just spawned. And then you might start seeing him just hand it off a little bit if the stacks start getting a little bit too high. But at this point, at a 13 level, they should be pretty comfortable to be able to deal with a full spire each.
Method and zooming past that electric gauntlet there, faster than Method PogChamp. Could be indicative of the end of the dungeon, we'll see. But they save a few seconds there as they start to do the trash, trying to spawn Galvaz as well. But PogChamp, I mean, just has such a substantial lead at this point. Very well performed on the boss here, 15%, getting ready to move to the second gauntlet after this.
Yeah, at this point, they're doing a great job being able to have that kind of control. None of the energy getting into Galvast here. And every single time one spawns, they have positions. They're marking out who is going to be next up in the rotation, who's going to be taking up those beams. Great job here by PogChamp. Only 1 death on the board as they're moving on to the last boss.
PogChamp moving forward here, dodging the beams. Now, this one is a bit tougher, so we'll have to keep an eye on, making sure nobody gets hit. Ooh. Dr. J cheekily blinks past the last of it. Now they have to deal with the bridge here. You do get slowed, and you do constantly have lightning strikes going on here. You want to enter the kind of mini boss mob at the end of this hallway, at the end of this bridge, to make sure that those balls stop spawning. Once you grab the channel here, this is, again, a different type of gauntlet. Name of the game here is there is an orb or eye on each side of the room, which you have to collect and throw over to the mouth of the snake. Once you fit those eyes in the eye sockets of the snake, you will open up the path to the last boss. A lot of mobs here. The most dangerous thing that can happen here is that they grab by accident one of the infested mobs. That's spooky.
Yeah, and at this point, they actually do end up, as you mentioned it, grabbing one of those infested mobs because they have to, because it will be in their way. You are seeing the blind going out onto the Orb Guardian here. Muscle Brawl's just waiting for the area to kind of get cleared out before he can actually end up grabbing the eye. And just, again, being able to throw the Orbit to himself, just keep on throwing it ahead of the group. That way they'll be able to quickly and efficiently be get ahead of the group and getting it slotted in very quickly. Sebs at this point just kiting everything out. They're going to be able to take advantage of the slows coming out from the mage, and they just have to watch out for a couple of little explosives that are going to be spawning from those Orb Guardians.
Yep, so yeah, Tank's job here is to just get everything and get it the heck away as far as you can, so the rest of the team can just grab the orbs and get them to the face as quickly as possible. Now, the infested in there's actually two, is going to be quite difficult to deal with. If they let any of those Goonies infest this mass amount of mobs here, it's just going to turn into just such a difficult situation. Oftentimes you actually see teams just opt to wipe here, use their battle res, and then go from there because it's such a time dump needing to deal with this.
It does take up quite a bit of time, but also if you have available to you, we've seen the shadow modes in the past be so helpful to be able to quickly and efficiently start getting away from any of these. You are seeing Sebs, who is going down, apparently may not have had like the shadow meld and may have failed, or we were seeing some of those explosives going off, so you made a shadow meld, got hidden by an explosive orb, and then you had to, of course, just put out a res on it.
Fortunately, no one else was in combat with any of those mobs on purpose to make sure that they can res them if anything went wrong, or if you purposely wiped here. They stealth past everything else. Now, these 4 hexers here do give percent, but I don't think it's going to give enough percent to finish off the dungeon, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember the exact percent. It'll be very close to it, though.
Yeah, it will be very close to it. And look at the Heart of Azeroth getting up to level 27. I'd love to see it. They were also able to, getting all these hexers in together. You're right, they do need to start catching up a little bit onto the rest of the trash percentage, but they do have a tremendous advantage with the buff that the boss gives them at the end. If they start pulling trash that they had just skipped, they'll be able to carry that buff over into clearing the rest of it.
And of course, with the extra strength that they just got from that level 27 negating mid-dungeon, the 4 hexers are pulled together. Lava Bursts do a ton of damage sporadically on the group. You want to interrupt as many as possible. They don't have the advantages, of course, of a prop paladin, anything with frequent interrupts. They just got to grab what they can. We do see some flay shots go out on the group. No problem for Elsrat to deal with. Method and A, not forgotten yet. They are finally downing the 3rd boss. We'll see how quickly they're able to move through the back-to-back gauntlet coming up. PogChamp now at 90%. They're going to make up the remainder of their trash with the buff that they get from the last boss. In the very last phase of this boss, you do get a massive buff. I believe it's 50% haste, 90% reduced damage taken, etc. So they're going to want to pull that last pack into the boss room to finish it off.
Right you are, Ted. And as they're going on to this, they're making sure they're dropping those fish feasts to start topping off all of Elzrat's mana. Despite his disc is annoying, but it's not impossible to do. A lot of times it's just going to be focusing on any kind of off-healing that you're able to offer, as well as really just controlling, and probably most importantly, controlling a lot of the frogs that will be falling down, the rain of toads when it comes down, leaving, whenever it impacts the player, leaving that disease dot onto him is just so annoying to deal with, especially if it's covering everybody. And when you're in that intermission phase as Disc Priest, you're not able to have any other kind of targets to be able to hit, so it can be very annoying and very difficult to deal with, and having everybody slowly kind of creeping down in health.
And if I'm not mistaken, that disease actually does add a healing reduction to you as well, making it harder to kind of keep everyone healthy in this splash AoE damage environment. The Hexers well dealt with here by Method PogChamp. We discussed earlier, right before the dungeon, the danger of explosive on this boss. Those Hexers are immobile and they spawn kind of in the quadrants around the room, so everybody has to keep a very good eye on any explosives. They can spawn at any time. Now, there was once upon a time when it was quite mean that these frogs would as well spawn explosives, but since then that has been fixed.
Yeah, but at this point, you're just saying everybody busting out the first aid here to be able to start healing themselves, helping out their Disc Priests. I'd love to see this. I'd love to be able to see that.
First aid.
But they're also doing a great job actually surrounding Elzrat here whenever those Rain of Toads came down. They're soaking up all of it, and they're able to take advantage of his disease dispelling. You're even seeing Dr. J using one of his ice blocks to make sure he's clearing off the debuff quickly and easily.
So the Guardians that spawn here are probably the most dangerous mob in the general phases. They do a stacking damage taken debuff on the tank, 20% per stack. So you want to make sure you kill those as quickly as possible, especially for something like a DK, not the most mobile tank in the world. So Want to make sure you get rid of all of those stacks as quickly as possible before the tank essentially does, or potentially can get one shot. Bit of a death coming over here from Method NA with mid as they res him on the other side. I think it was to deal with the gauntlet. Indeed it was. It was a purposeful death, similar as we saw with PogChamp, wanting to kind of get all the mobs out of the way, out of combat, and now they as well are heading for the last boss.
A lot of damage going out here onto the side of PogChamp. They were not able to get the Dispel out onto Muscle Bra, and an explosive went off here. What happened was Elzra was actually dispelling one of the disease debuffs. He's going down here. PogChamp here only left alive. They have 2 battle reses left available to it, but it looks like it's going to be a full wipe.
And that's what we were talking about. These explosives are just so dangerous with the amount of damage going out on the fight. You have one slip up, it just causes a chain reaction. And just like that, Method NA are right back in it as they're already working on this boss. 84% trash on the, actually, excuse me, they're still dealing with the Hexers, getting ready to start on the last boss. Method PogChamp needs to hustle and get back. This is a very long boss fight, and they need to get started right away again.
They really do, and it also shows, you know, some of the experience as well going into this, where, you know, you were seeing Elzra dispelling one of the diseases going out. They do got a battle res going out for Marv on the side of Method NA. You start topping it off. We've seen those Hexer pulls. It can be quite annoying when you're getting everything in together. But at this point, this is Method NA right now is going to be in the driver's seat. Because Elzra at that point had dispelled one of the diseases coming up from one of the frogs. The Plague Doctor casted the Voodoo Totem, which again, polymorphed Muscle Bra. Muscle Bra was caught in one of the lightning strikes and wasn't able to move because he was still polyed, and Elzra didn't want to be able to use his Mass Dispel here because it cost so much mana to it. So a little bit of an error there just like slowly led to the collapse of the rest of the group, and when we see Muscle Bra go down, you start missing out on being able to kill any of those explosives, and just that chain reaction is a nightmare.
I mean, at this point, it's Method's game to lose and win at this point, so we'll have to see which one comes out.
Profound, profound.
They are getting ready to pull the boss here. We see already some of the explosives have spawned in the quadrants. One of them does go off already. You want to make sure you have really good coverage. The dot comes up as Dark was already quite low. Manages to heal, but another explosive goes off for Method NA, barely holding on. It's going to start chewing a lot of the defensives that JB might want to be saving for the boss healing during the intermission.
Yeah, you see this early trank going out for the group here, right at the very beginning of it, and that's where you want to be able to have those, you know, fair markers as to where everybody's responsibilities are going to be. It's going to be very efficient if you're going to be able to start dotting up everything and slowly taking everything down. But when you have to deal with the explosives on top of it from any of those 4 locations, it can be immensely difficult.
And I believe there's a bit of an advantage here for the rest of Druid over the Disc Priest, Jack. We've talked oftentimes on this boss just being able to kind of just power heal through those transition phases. Method PogChamp, of course, not out yet. They have once again pulled the boss, and I mean, we're pretty much back neck and neck between the two teams. There's a 4-death difference between them, 20 seconds on the clock in favor of PogChamp in this case, but this is a long boss fight, and they still need to pull some of the extra trash and the last phase. Yeah,
I think at this point, like you said, the 4-death differential, I think just about equal to each other in terms of where they need to be. At this point, though, like you said, it's very easy, especially whenever you're able to put many different healing effects out onto the avatar of Sethraliss, because of course the whole point of this fight is after you kill those Hexers, you need to quickly top off the avatar. Every single healing effect is going to be adding additional healing whenever you click the orb that is dropped by the Heart Guardian. So clicking that orb and all the different healing effects that Rested Druid is able to bring versus pretty much a Shadowman spam, maybe defensive penance going out there, are really the only things. So I think you will start seeing a lot of the extra power healing going out on the side in the advantage of Method NA.
Really good coverage here for Method NA as they deal with a lot of spawning in the different quadrants. Important to note, of course, that the casters that spawn during the fight spawn near the entrance of the room, so you want to make sure you grab them right away on top of whatever else you're DPSing so that they don't spawn random explosives at the beginning of the room. We are now in that second healing phase as we see JB just pouring regrowths into the avatar of Sethraliss in the middle. We do have breakpoints at 40 and 70%, so once again, the healing is locked on the boss in the middle, and they have to deal with one more round of Hexers and Guardians.
Yeah, after this round of Hexers and Guardians, they will be able to heal it up to that 100% level and start getting that buff that we've been talking about, which is going to be very heavily needed here as you're going to start seeing, you know, once PogChamp starts going into that next intermission phase, they need to be able to heal even more. That's really where it starts draining away a lot of your mana, when you have to be spamming just about Shadow Men's to be able to deal with a lot of it. You're not having any kind of off healers on either side, really, to be able to help you assist. The things like having the disease dispels can also take up a lot of extra, or it can also save you a lot of extra mana, but unfortunately they don't have them.
Now they got to be careful here. Rev has 5 stacks already from the Guardian running around. He can't exactly get away too easily. It's 100% increased damage taken for him as you see him kind of trying to get away with it. 6 stacks now, and Marv is chunking in damage as well. Rev is actually in pretty prime position to just take huge hits of damage. You see him just trying to get away from the Guardian as quickly as possible. They do finally down it though.
The Toads are going after JB here. They're just trying to be able to get all of them down. You are seeing all of them getting soaked up by Dark with the Cloak of Shadows there, but that was a huge pile that he had to dodge. And on their side, they don't have any sort of disease dispel.
So once again, we are now in the last phase. They do have to do one more round of clear with the massive buff that they get. A lot of haste, a lot of damage decrease taken. You see they turn back right away to grab the rest of the trash that they need. They're only at 91% right now. They want to utilize the buff that they get in this last phase. As soon as they kill those 4 hexers and heal the avatar to 100%, they have to kill the remaining 9% of trash. That's already part of the mess that you're seeing on your screen. A lot of explosives all over the place. PogChamp not far behind now, healing through their second transition and getting ready for the 70% phase.
Yeah, at this point, all Netherlands needs to do is just play cleanly, deal with these explosives, and be able to take everything down here, and this game is going to be theirs after what it was a horrible, horrible start for them.
There's just so many explosives out on the border right now. Everybody has to pay attention to hitting them, but not a lot of damage that they're taking from that. They do have their huge damage reduction from the boss buffs, as you see.
They don't even care.
They don't even care, so they're just making sure that everything's kept in check and they're DPSing the mobs as quickly as possible. The explosives doing 90% reduced damage to the group, which is why you're seeing them just letting them go off as often as they can. PogChamp's just slowly trying to catch up right now. Remember, they have an extra 20 seconds to try and clean up the rest of this fight. Method NA now at 96% for the trash, working desperately to clean the rest of it and stop their timer.
Yeah, at this point, 96% left onto the trash, 2 mobs left remaining, these little Heart Guardians, and that's going to be it. Method NA. After what was an incredible rocky start.
Very rocky start. 20 seconds I just don't think is going to be enough for Method PogChamp to catch up. They still have to deal with their buff phase, which hasn't happened yet.
And they got a whole other percent of heal, and not going to be able to happen for them. Method NA.
And you just, it just goes to show you stick it out, you have a rocky start. Consistency, persistence, and they won the first match.
What a ride. What a ride that match was. Method NA, just such a disadvantage. That looked like it was just absolutely destined to be PogChamps after that setback. And I mean, this is what we talk about. This is what competitive PvE is, right? You're not necessarily playing against another team. You're playing against really yourself. You're playing against the trash. And that was a situation where, look, we were talking about some teams just hope for mistakes from the other teams. And that went right back to Method NA, basically gift wrapped by PogChamp.
Yeah, it was pretty much Team PogChamp's game to lose, and they did ended up doing so. We saw Method NA though having one big slip up too there, where they tried to do a death skip with the Druid and the Rogue, and JB ended up pulling a mob and he couldn't rest anymore. I'm not sure why they didn't use their Soul Stone to keep him up again, but we'll talk about it after.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take a short break though. Don't go anywhere. More Mythic Dungeon Invitational All-Stars after the break.
The 2018 World of Warcraft Arena World Championship is brought to you in part by Republic of Gamers, Corsair, T-Mobile, Samsung SSD, and NVIDIA.
In the Overwatch League, you're hyping up the chat, taking your team to #trending, and spreading memes at tracer level speed.
All while watching us cap the point.
Speed like that deserves a network that can keep up. With T-Mobile, get all the Overwatch League you can handle with coast-to-coast coverage. Now your arena is where you make it.
NA currently greater than EU in the Method Bowl for the moment. You EU types. I just want to say this is as much gloating as I get to do when it comes to dungeons and you guys. So I'm going to really hold it tightly. This is my moment.
It's the only way you'll get.
Yeah.
That's right.
Nagura, so looking at what happened there, you know, it definitely seemed like Method NA, aside from the misstep with trying to do the skipping on the pole, certainly looked like they were the better team, at least for that series. Do we necessarily think that's indicative of the rest of the series?
I think both of the teams had one big slip up there, but for Team PogChamp, it just cost them way too much time because his last boss fight it's just such a long fight, and they wiped at pretty much at the very end of it. But I want to talk about Method NA's skip first, the death skip that happened to them. So they do have the Druid, which no other team runs. All the other teams are running a Monk or Dispriest, and Druids are pretty good at doing those kind of death skips. Now in BFA, death skips aren't that easy anymore as they were in Legion, because most of the battle rests have a cast time now, like a Druid, for example, so you can't instantly rest your healer anymore, and we don't have the Paladins anymore. So now death skip is a lot easier if you have the Druid who can stealth, or you have a Warlock who can Soul Stone preemptively, which they have both, but they didn't use the Soul Stone preemptively because they thought they don't actually need it. Then we ended up seeing JB die, and he didn't have the Soul Stone, so he had to walk all the way back. So next time they have to think ahead a little bit and actually use that Soul Stone just to, you know, in case something happens.
Yeah, speaking to the point of not using that Soul Stone, you know, when I have peeked in on JB's stream and I'm not distracted by his lustrous chest hair, that is something that I've seen them practicing, right, his temple. That's something that they've known they were going to have to do. And when you do it that many times, it's just kind of automatic, right? It's a reflex, it's a lock. You think, why am I possibly going to need the Soul Stone? I could do this with my eyes closed, but that's a situation where it did punish them a little bit. Didn't end up costing them the entirety of the map, but obviously it was a huge setback.
Yeah, a very automatic setback.
Automatic setback.
Going into it, of course. But now going forward for this, they really have to start seeing, okay, where are the areas we messed up? We need to make sure we're playing cleanly here, because I think, like you mentioned before, it was PogChamp's game to lose, and they just gave it away, right? And because NA continue to be playing their game, continue to actually be focusing on what they needed to be able to do, they were in a position to capitalize when somebody messes up. They're able to actually, you know, react in response to when other errors happen and take the game. So Freehold, they got to be able to start it off cleanly, and any of those skips that they're going to be doing early, they need to make sure they're, you know, not putting themselves at that massive disadvantage again.
Yeah, putting a period on that last map, it is something where Method NA, maybe in the past, we've kind of seen them have moments of tilt. It definitely did not affect them, though, the situation they were running into, and they were able to turn it around. Going into Freehold, though, so I hope you like pirate stories, because that's where we're heading. I'm not personally a big fan of pirates, but Ted, how do you feel about pirates?
Arr.
Okay, well, I guess now you can actually... That was all I expected, and I'm not disappointed, so please talk about the dungeon.
This is actually the dungeon that I was thinking, and Nagura mentioned earlier, that I think Warlock is a nice advantage here. To just have a couple of cheeky little skips with portals, cut a couple of the bridges, early access to the third boss if they want on Harlan's Suite. So, bit of help from the Warlock. Is it groundbreaking? Is it going to make them up, 1-2 minutes? No, but every bit helps when the races have been as close as they've been today.
Oh, I was going to say, as our good friend Sowers would say, it's about going fast, and certainly that can give you a little advantage, help you go a little bit faster. So curious to see how much that ends up impacting. I've actually never seen Warlocks on Freehold. Down in the +3s, we just don't see a whole lot of it. It's all just marksmanship hunters, and we don't have demonic gateways, so.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, too. When I get home, Beast Mastery, I'm switching. Nagura, going into this, do you agree with his assessment? Do you think the Warlock is going to be necessarily that big of a boon, or do you think it'll kind of even out over the course of those compositions? At least what we saw. Obviously, they can make changes.
Yeah, so I think Team PogChamp might actually change to a Warlock too, since we have Shelley, who's a main Warlock, who did play Demon Hunter this last game, but he has the option to switch to it, and I think he will be.
All right, we'll have to see what happens, though. I believe we are ready to get into this game. Now, EU has one last chance to stay in the All-Stars event. If PogChamp loses this, we are heading for a North America versus Asia Pacific finale.
Jack, here we are at Freehold. Shiver me timbers as we get ready to pull a lot. Here's the thing. This dungeon has a lot of trash, a lot of just different routes we see from the teams right away with the stealth too, but we are once again in a bolstering environment. Both teams stealthing through. We see the double rogue come out of Method NA, wanting to get that subtlety, focused single target damage on the higher health mobs with this bolstering environment.
Yeah, would love to be able to see these kind of coming out more often here. Method NA, and you're also seeing, like you mentioned, as Nagura said before, Shella is going, of course, to his Warlock, and it's going to be very good to be able to get those extra little skips coming out here. It was no surprise, of course, that we're going to see Marv on the Warlock, and so both teams will be able to have that nice advantage going into this.
Now, in order to spawn this first boss, so they can stop him from having the parrot guano go all over the floor, you do need to kill one of the first 2 Enforcer packs. Once they do that, it will spawn the boss. The boss can go out of bounds. You want to keep him kind of central in this area. Some teams also opt to do a bit more trash after this first mandatory pull to wait for their 2-minute CDs to come back up so that they're able to just burst everything with Bloodlust.
Yeah, at this point, it's really going to be everybody tightly stacking up together, being in pretty close together, so that the charge is not going to be going out too far. Always very important to make sure they're staying in range, so that Muscle Bra, for example, is not going to have to be running around too far. PogChamp starting up the fight a little bit sooner than at Method NA here, getting a little bit of an advantage at the start of the instance.
The boss 2 phases here will dismount around 75-70%, where the parrot will kind of rise up and start guanoing once again on the rest of the group, the closest proximity target as they fly around, periodically coming down and sweeping through the middle of the floor, knocking back any player. The boss himself, quite dangerous, especially in the tyrannical setting, Jack, with that kind of frontal that he does on a targeted member. Could also be on the tank, and it's a huge amount of fire damage.
Yep, and I'd love to be able to see the positioning here out of Elzrat, actually standing very far away from Dr. J and Shada, baiting out any of the refuse from Squawks here, making sure that they're able to get all of those taken care of, while Dr. J and Shada are just able to sit there and turret as much as they need to and stay very far out of range.
So similar to what we saw with Excel's Angels, we see Method NA grab a ton of trash on top of the boss. Skittish Affix is there. They want to make sure they feed as much single target damage as they can for those 2 rogues. They have to be really careful. If any of that trash accidentally dies, it will bolster everything around it, including the boss for 20% health and damage. So they want to focus the damage really well, get the trash just low enough so that they can kill it after the boss dies. Really big pull here.
Yeah, great pull, and like you said, the bigger risk that they're going to have to be taking here, making sure that only the rogues are going to be dealing any other kind of damage to them, just relying on Tricks of the Trade to be able to keep on funneling extra threat into Rev here. Always be very important, because those accidental deaths, especially on bosses on Tyrannical with that much HP, just eats up so much extra time and could just hurt the advantage that they're already working on right now.
And Method, the 2 Method teams like Method Brothers here, doing a similar pull on PogChamp. They pull the trash a bit later once the boss is already low enough. They just don't have as much sustained single target focus, not having that second subtlety rogue, but they do get some trash opt as well, as Sky Captain Craig is about to fall over. 5% left for Method NA, cleaning up the rest of the trash. All is quite low. Everything was controlled excellent, and they're getting ready to move forward.
A great play here by Method NA, as PogChamp still trying to be able to deal with the rest of this trash here. And Method NA starting late, but taking out of their early advantage now.
And here we are with one of the skips, as we alluded to earlier.
Yeah.
Skipping right across that bridge. Both teams dodging that Enforcer, which is just a kind of mini-boss style mob, not CCable, just a pain in the butt to deal with. Now, we are in a skittish environment, not something that is easily telegraphed to you folks here, but that does mean that the tank has to produce extra threat, aka be extra aggressive, to maintain aggro on all the mobs. So they have to make sure to give them a second just to grab everything together and AoE, get as much damage as possible before everyone opens up on damage.
Or bring 2 rogues.
Or bring 2 rogues.
Very good to see here that as they're pulling a lot of the mobs, they're actually avoiding the event for now. They're going to make sure that they're actually dealing with the Trapper and, of course, the little vermin that he actually has alongside of him. Killing all the little vermin before he brings the Trapper back in with the rest of the group. It's very easy to get quick bolsters out onto that. So very important to make sure that they're just dealing with any of the smallest mobs first, getting them out of the way, and then moving on from there to get the rest of these mobs down.
Yeah, there's a lot of packs here, a lot of optional routes, and I'm sure they've mapped them out to deal with as little infested as possible. Now, the trappers that do come out from that Quinn Rat do a lot of damage, a lot of dot damage, and you can get rooted in place. Now, somebody could, well, there's no paladin available here, but you can usually freedom through them, sustain the dot, and it will only root you at the end of whatever mobility freeing a talent or ability you use. Nothing too available for them here. JB can run through them as you see him now, and he shapeshifts in and out, which breaks the root for him.
Yeah, but very easy to make sure you're taking care of that for everybody else here. Also important to note that they started the event early. The event that we're going to be having is actually going to be disabling the Valkyra captains. So they will not have to deal with any of the blasts coming out. They will not have to be following around the captain at all. So they will be able to just start drinking with some of the build rats and stopping that boss from going into the fight.
Water is, of course, what they're drinking here on today's stream. Method PogChamp dealing with another small skip here, just wanted to get everything in position as quickly as possible. There are a couple casters lingering on the side. We'll have at least one grip coming out of Sebs for that, and he does an asphyxiate on the side there on the skull target. It gets a few sheeps off, making sure that it doesn't get too many water bolts off. And I don't believe that's an infested mob, just trying to peek here. One of the bigger mobs comes in, making sure to focus. That guy is about double the amount of health of the smaller trash mobs that you see here, meaning that they really need to focus that single target. He already came in late, and everything else is at half HP.
And they really can start wasting a lot of time if they're not careful. You did see the cheat death go out on the side of mid there. Very important that they're always going to be watching out for that. And also, whenever you have these crushers, not only do they have so much HP, but also just the area denial that they'll often have when you're in very melee heavy groups, for example, on Method NA. They start pulling multiple of these together. It can be very difficult to be able to kind of get the right uptime that you want, and making sure that you're not killing any of those mobs early, especially when you need to be putting a ton of damage into them with like the Blizzard, the Frozen Orb, all the extra slows that are being put out.
Yeah, Dr. J here, absolutely crucial with the Frost Mage to making sure that you kite those heavily bolstered mobs away from the tank, and Sebs has ample time to get away, build some resources if needed, and get back in for a Death Strike or two. It doesn't look like they're dangerous on the screen right now, but those mobs have a ton of bolster stacks. 20% extra damage per stack, could easily one-shot Sebs. So you see him dip in there for just a second, gets chunked to 1/3 HP just within one melee.
Yeah, it's very important that they're always watching out for those as they're starting to get themselves ready for the next pull. They'll probably just continue clearing trash until they actually have Bloodlust left available to them, and then they'll be able to start using that on either the Council of Captains, or if they have the time and want to go into throwback early, they might be able to do that early on as well.
Pretty big pull coming out here of Method PogChamp on the right, and not to be left behind, Method NA doing the same. They've already kind of gone on to the Ring of Booty, getting ready to plunder that, dealing with all of the crushers as much as they can on the side. Remember, these have double health of everything else, but they have the advantage of that double subtlety rogue, just dishing so much single target focus damage into those crushers.
Yeah, but very important as they are activating the first part of the Ring of Booty, having to chase down Lightning the pig, making sure that they're able to get, the 5 grabs that are required onto it. But because everybody else is going to be working on it, they have to watch out for the stun as they're standing in the path of the rock thrower. JB dropping really low here, 9% left, getting himself topped off. But like I said, that's a danger. Having that 2-second stun going out from trying to grab that greasy pig can be so dangerous when you're doing these kind of pulls.
Jack, we were really interested to see where the world first wipe to this pig mechanic was going to be.
It's more dangerous than you know.
JB actually does go down there as they try to grab the pig. You got to move out of those boulders, especially with the bolstering stacks. Fortunately, JB can release and stealth back quickly to the rest of the team as they finish off the trash.
But you know where he's at? He's actually at Sky Captain Crag's room, so they're getting the summoning stone down because he has to travel all the way across the instance otherwise.
Oh, shiver me timbers, Jack. They're getting ready now to pull Ludwig von Tortolen, which is kind of a mini-boss style mob. It's not actually one of the bosses, but is a huge time dump. He just has a ton of health. Now they finally get him over, they summon him, and they're ready to pull in just a minute. Method PogChamp dealing with a ton of the trash on the side, getting ready to move over to the pirates as well. So the two teams working on 2 different bosses, a very open concept dungeon in terms of which boss order you do. In fact, you can even do the last boss second or third if you want.
Yeah, great job here pulling the Crusher in as well, because they will have 2 very heavy targets in both the Crusher and Ludwig to be able to start taking down. And of course, any of these neutral, any of these yellowy mobs that you're seeing running into the group will not add bolster stacks to either Ludwig or the larger Crusher here. So it's very easy fodder here for both the rogues on the side of Method NA.
Method PogChamp. Now, it is important to know you do see the health bar of all 3 captains here for PogChamp on the right side. Only 2 of them are actually enemies and active right now. The other one is friendly. There's a rotation every week, of course. It is consistent for both teams right now to make sure everything is proper for integrity and fairness between the 2 teams. So we'll see Method NA move over to that just a bit later. Crusher going down now for Method NA as they finish off Von Tortolen as well. PogChamp dealing with the second boss.
Yeah, right here you're seeing PogChamp doing a great job watching out for any of the brews that are coming out, as you will see that there is the bartender out onto the side who will start throwing brews in. There's the Inshella and everybody stacking up to be able to receive it. 3 different abilities, increases that you're going to be able to get. One of them is a very nasty caustic dot that you can actually stand the captains in so that they can start taking that damage. Another one will give you haste, and another will give you crit. So very important to make sure you're watching either through a weak aura or just focusing and watching the cast coming out from the bartender here, and to know which brew is going to be coming in to be able to receive that extra damage.
Yeah. actually a huge buff and a huge amount of damage on the bosses, so the better you play off with that, the better off you'll be, getting just a ton of time gained on this boss. PogChamp doing really well to do that. Sometimes you just have inevitable denial on the area that you want to soak or have the bosses soak in just because of some of the barrel smash or of course the saber going out from the bosses. But you see mid get really low there, really big pull coming in from Method and A as well, similar to the first boss, wanting to feed those two subtlety rogues.
Yeah, and really, they're pulling also a lot of red enemy mobs, so anytime those are dying, that'll be bolstering at Trothak here. And JB, I think, has a really heavy responsibility to start dealing with a lot of the sharks coming out from Trothak here. Balancing between him and Marv will be very important to be able to take those, deal with them whenever possible, and you always have to watch out for those charges as he picks the sharks back up and then starts throwing another one.
Both teams just similar gameplay here, getting as much trash as they can on top of the boss, but making sure to kill the boss first. Method and having the advantage in that, like we saw with Excel's Angels earlier, because they're just able to funnel so much more single target, so they're able to pull that trash earlier for those rogues, whilst PogChamp actually just needs to pull towards the end of the boss's health cycle.
Yeah, at that point, you're also seeing Bloodlust coming out very soon for PogChamp to be left available to them. But like right now, Method NA for a boss that usually is lusted on, especially in a tyrannical setting, didn't even need it. They're down to 13% out on Trothak here and just having a very strong showing right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a ton of percentage gained in just a moment as Trothak goes down as well. They're going to get all that trash cleaned up too. PogChamp at 69%, moving over to the Ring of Booty themselves.
Oh.
Mid does go down at the end, so that's going to be an extra 5 seconds on the clock. There's still a lot of trash left, so they opt to use that battle res. I mean, they're not going to have that available for pretty much the rest of the dungeon. Looks like they're holding off on actually accepting the res, though. It seems that they're confident that they can clean it up, and it's not worth the time gain.
Yeah, I don't think it's worth the risk right now, because like you said, if they're not going to be able to get another battle res available to them for the rest of this dungeon, based off the times that they're going after right now. And while it looks like, you know, they're both one boss down, there was so much RP, there's so much time to actually get to Trothak already. So I think Method NA, you know, has quite a distinct advantage, not only in trash, but in terms of the bosses that they are dealing with. And they're getting Bloodlust back to be able to deal with the Council of Captains.
Yeah, Council of Captains is a particularly nasty boss in this tyrannical, environment. Just a lot of damage on the tank, and of course the sporadic damage on the group, especially if you're bad to get out of the barrels or anything of that sort. A lot of pressure that would go on the healer, but they're getting ready now to pull that second boss, and PogChamp is moving towards the third boss that we just saw Method and A deal with. But this sloppiness is starting to add up, Jack. It's already 3 deaths on the board for Method and A. That's an extra 15 seconds, and we say it time and time again. We said it at the Globals as well. Those add up, and we've seen how close some of these matches have been.
They really have been, but in order to make up for lost time here, you're seeing quite a big pull of trash going into the boss here. Again, more risky pulls here to be able during bolstering setting, and they still have some of the neutral mobs, some of the yellow mobs, if they wanted to be able to deal with it. So they really have to watch a lot of their cleave damage here as they're going up against Captain Jolly and Captain Raoul.
Those yellow mob health bars, of course, not to be mistaken for rogues. There are already several of those on the Method NA side. Dealing well with all the mechanics so far, making sure they get some of those sorely soaks from the bruise coming in. We see them flying midair right now. PogChamp, similarly large pull, pulling a lot of trash onto Von Tortolan, the kind of pre-boss to Trothak.
Yeah, and right here you're seeing just 41% left onto Captain Jolly here. Doing a great job of making sure they focus him down first, as he will offer more of the aerial denial, keeping them out of any of the brew buffs that the bartender will be throwing here. The Whirlpool Blades is extremely difficult to be able to actually get back into the boss because the hitbox of Captain Jolly is so small, as I'm sure you could tell me about.
Why, yes, it is a very frustrating mechanic, but nonetheless, if you backpedal it just close enough, he does absorb it, and the players can more freely enjoy the rest of the space and soak some of those brews, as we mentioned. PogChamp getting ready now to work on Trothak. Seems that they're getting ready to pull some trash on top of him. No surprise here, as we've seen both teams do. And Captain Raoul now plummeting quickly in HP, down to 60% as they start to clean up the rest of the trash too.
I mean, right here they're doing a great job. And also important to note is that because they're pulling more trash into the fight and they are still remaining in combat, as they're clearing up the rest of these mobs, Eudora will still stay active until the combat actually ends up dropping. So her extra damage being contributed into the group, while also having all these smaller mobs being extra fodder to be able to feed the sub-rogues, is very strong.
Fodder indeed, Jack. Now, NA is slightly behind on trash percentage here. They're going to get a bit of gain. PogChamp is already at 90%. They still have some to clean up, and they, of course, have the Painful Motivation group, the 2-pack, if they choose to deal with it on the bridge skip, prior to the bridge skip, right before the last boss. If I'm not mistaken, neither team has actually used their Bloodlust here right now. At least Method NA hasn't. Seems that they're saving it for that last boss, because we do have that increased damage taking phase at the end. Mid getting quite low here, ate one of the wrong brews, if I'm not mistaken, and it seems to be taking a heavy nature down, dot.
You know, definitely another thing that you would want to eat. You know, usually you should just try to drink a brew, but always wholesome water instead here. Method NA clearing up the rest of the trash, any of the small yellowies here before they have to move on to Harlan's Sweet Room. But they're also really well positioned to have a very strong Painful Motivation pull coming up.
Yeah, and keep in mind this mechanic has been iterated upon. Let's put it that way. You can't really kind of just pull the whole instance with it anymore and let the mobs die off. It will only select up to 3, if I'm not mistaken, mobs that it does clip. And in a bolstering environment, you certainly don't want the wrong mobs getting buffed too quickly. So perhaps it's something they're actually opting to skip entirely. As we see, PogChamp is now at 98% trash. Looks like they're probably just kind of going to have a clean skip back-to-back bosses. Troithak about to go down. They're going to go up on the bridge. They're going to use the skip with Shela's portal, of course, and then they're going to start working on Harlan.
Yeah, and they're doing a great job positioning themselves here, getting close to any of the chum buckets that are dropping down. You are seeing Bloodlust coming up on the side of PogChamp here to start helping burn down the last 50% of Troithak, being able to get it out of the way, because a lot of times, especially when they're so caster heavy in this group, it's very difficult to be able to keep on managing and keep on kiting out all of the sharks that are coming out here. It's going to be very, very annoying to deal with here. So everybody's doing a great job spreading out for the Sharknado that's coming out, and also making sure they're getting rid of any of those sharks that are out in the way. Shella having to run for his life, activating Burning Rush, and taking a ton of damage from that shark. And of course, important to note, it's nature damage coming out from the shark because sharks are from nature, I guess.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. I mean, it is a ton of damage coming out of those sharks indeed. You can face tank them a bit even as a tank, but eventually you're going to have to move unless you have an immunity pop like spell warding from a paladin. Of course, not available here. We're using 2 blood DKs. They have to move over quickly and make sure they kite the sharks through those chum buckets to slow them by 50%. We see the skip immediately from Method and A. 5% left on trash, but they do aggro Harlan's Suite, the final boss of the dungeon. Notoriously short, just like my friend Robert here, and is quite dangerous in the last few phases of the fight.
Very dangerous at the end of the fight, but also takes a massive amount of increased damage here, so they'll be able to save their Bloodlust left for that, as well as be able to take down the boss from there. So very important to note that you will have, of course, the cannon fire going out from the boss, which will originally just be targeting one player at a time, and then it will start targeting everybody else a little bit later. They're sitting there waiting for the first 3 shots, and then they're starting to move out to maximize the space available.
Yeah, now, this kind of is a 3-phase fight, I would say, Jack. Similar mechanics throughout all the phases, but at 70%, all of his mechanics will target everyone in the group, and then at 30%, at 60%, and then at 30%, the boss will take 100% increased damage, but gain 100% haste, dealing more tank damage. So you're seeing the group stick together here. He's hitting that 60% mark soon, after which the group will need to move together around the area, making sure that the cannonballs are not taking up too much of the space, because a lot of that fire on ground takes a while to despawn.
It really does, and making sure that, you know, they're doing a great job kind of backing them to the side area there. That way they actually have somewhere to move out if need be. So they're doing a great job. 65% left onto it. PogChamp also engaging with Harlan Suite at 85%. Bloodlust is on the side of Method NA, but they do need 5% more trash, and they do have a 15-second deficit.
Yeah, exactly. I do believe they're going to kind of pull some of that trash on top of the boss at the very end with Bloodlust, trying to get everything down all in one nice little package. Everybody is now going to be targeted by the bombs coming in for Method and A, the cannonballs coming in. PogChamp at 75% on the boss. No Bloodlust accessible to them. They will be killing everything slower, but do not have to deal with any of the danger of the trash, and have a 15-second buff. 15-second advantage, rather. Harlan, of course, dropping his cannonballs. The Harlan shuffle coming out of Method and A right now. They pull all the trash on, and this is a big pull here.
This is a really big and very aggressive pull here. They do have to be dealing with a lot of these enforcers, which tend to be tossing the tank all over the place. But this is exactly the environment Rev loves to be in. Very important to make sure they watch their positioning, though. He's not going to be moving out of the boss room, for example, which would be threatening a reset. But he is getting tossed right back into the cannon fire, moving as quickly as he can to get out of that. They're just getting close to, taking the boss down and getting into that increased damage phase.
Those enforcers are just so dangerous. They toss the tank to one of the far targets, so the group has to make sure to stick together, but not too close, because he does do splash damage when he lands, and there's already a ton of damage going out. Harlan now down to 15% for Method and A, taking 100% increased damage, 95% on the trash board. They do need to finish up some of the trash. Dark does get quite low as they get away from the cannon right now. They run over into the corner, but they still have 5% left on the trash. Harlan Suite at 38% for PogChamp on the right side, entering the 100% damage taken soon.
Rev dropping really low there, down to 20%. They got 3% left onto the trash here. They've got to just sweep up the last of these enforcers here. They're getting free casts from all of those storm callers there. They just really need to watch out for the extra damage onto that tank. 100% trash.
We still have 15 seconds on the board, and Harlan is taking 100% increased damage right now. PogChamp might be able to pull this off with a last-second upset just because of the sloppy deaths from Method NA. 15% on the board.
It's not going to be enough.
It's not going to be enough, though. They just didn't get enough single target feed at the end, and that was a close one again.
Very close one, and Method NA taking this with 2-0.
NA greater than EU at the Mythic Dungeon Invitational All-Stars. You guys can come home now. Come on back to NA. I welcome you. Yeah. Kona, come on in. I got you. Come on back. And, you know,
Brothers.
Nagura,
I got you,
Nagura,
brother.
you're welcome too. I know you know, you were technically not from NA, but you're welcome to join us too. Beautiful
might have to.
California. Yeah, welcome on back. And now we have an NA versus Asia Pacific Finals as Method NA takes the win here. And look, history repeats itself, right? This is what we saw at the Global Finals. When these two teams tilted, this is more just than a random occurrence. This is now a statistic. This is now the trend. And going forward, you have to imagine this sets an interesting stage for the MDI program in 2019 for these two Method squads.
Yeah, it really shows, you know, how well a team can kind of start going together when they have so much time dedicated to just being around each other, knowing how everybody else plays. And from Method NA side, I know they're very excited about the next series.
And we talked about how Method NA is more laid back and they don't practice too much. But I talked to Shella from Team PogChamp, and they pretty much said, so in Freehold, we are going to lose against Method NA if they pull extra mobs on top of the Shark boss, right? And they said they're probably not going to do it because it's very risky and it's very difficult. But we saw they ended up doing it, and it gave them so much time, and it's probably a big reason why they won.
I mean, Method NA just across the board in Freehold, they were doing riskier pulls, right?
Oh, yeah.
Certainly on the final boss there, that was just potential for everything to go wrong. We saw how often Rev was being bounced into the cannon shots. There is a world, absolutely, where that cost them the series. But look, risk versus reward, brinksmanship is a difficult art to master, but it certainly seems like Method NA figured it out in that night.
I mean, it was fantastic. Both teams just huge pulls, but yeah, you're right. Every pull was just more dangerous for NA because they pumped those double sub rogues. They wanted to up maximum. Excuse me, I'm just lost for words here. It was amazing. They're just wanted to get so much extra uptime for the single target damage from those rogues, and it paid off. I mean, it was really close at the end of the day. Even with the sloppiness, it just showed how much advantage they had doing those really aggressive pulls. But you're right, Rob. I mean, it could have gone wrong at any second there, but it didn't. Not today, at least.
I mean, I don't want to be results-oriented, but you kind of have to be in these situations, right? You have to say, like, well, it could have gone wrong, it didn't, and clearly that is what matters here. But as we saw in the end of the first series, both teams talking, you know, they were hugging briefly, and JB's already just down there like, well, here's probably what you did wrong, here's what I did right. That's how I imagine that conversation is actually going.
It's just incredible to make sure that there's, you know, that camaraderie coming in for the game as both teams are running, you know, not too dissimilar comps going into this series, and it was, you know, how they're making those larger trash pulls, you know, feeding the rogues as much as they possibly could has just been such a distinct advantage from the land that we saw in June and still going into BFA.
Yeah, certainly, and when you're looking at how these rogue compositions tend to work, I mean, do you guys think bolstering in the way it functions adds like a degree of difficulty, or do you just think because of the minimal actual area effect damage coming out, maybe it's not necessarily such a big deal and the payoff is worth the risk?
I think it's definitely very difficult to have bolstering and still pull those mobs into the boss to get the benefit from the sub-rogues. But we saw Method NA pull it off perfectly. It was very risky, definitely, because if you have one mob die, it already buffs the boss by a lot, and the fact it's a lot more difficult, especially on Tyrannical. So, but it works, right? It was a risky strat, and it worked out for them.
I would think as well, you know, Necrotic we've seen in the past many times where that can also be, you know, a factor to try to control those kind of big pulls. But in the past, you know, the more that we've had these experienced tanks, the more that we've had tanks who just know when to kite, who, you know, DPS who know what they need to be able to focus on. Those are the things that require greater control, but when the teams have it, just insanely powerful.
And both teams clearly, as they were doing it, they knew what they were doing, right? And that's we were talking earlier about, well, is there a point where maybe a certain point of practice is too much versus what's the exact point you want to hit? And certainly in those situations where you really have to hit the very perfect points, it's not just, you know, sitting there doing damage and moving along. You really have to make sure the practice is there.
Well, that's what the funny thing is, we were talking about going into this, they're saying, oh, we don't practice that much. We're not that practiced. We're not worrying about what we need to be doing. And then you see here, they're pulling all kinds of mobs into bolstering situations, and they're dealing
Talking
with
about
it
practice.
We ain't even talking about the game.
I smell a lie. We've been debated.
A little bit of debating potentially, but I feel like in the history of Method NA, that's something I've kind of come to expect from them. Taking a look at the schedule, though, Excels, Angels versus Free Marcy. Obviously, we saw Free Marcy emerge victorious, unseeded the 2018 Legion champions, and Method versus NA, Method NA versus PogChamp. We just saw NA triumph. So, one series left on the day on the event. It's going to be Method NA versus Free Marcy, and I'll be honest, this was not the bracket I expected to see, but I'm excited for it. And you know, as we said, this is all setting the trend for 2019, the MDI program with Battle for Azeroth, and I think this is an exciting trend to set as Free Marcy is certainly looking to claw their way back to that champion status.
I mean, I agree. But what's impressive here is, again, Free Marcy, we've mentioned it a million times and we'll keep mentioning it. They were the guys that were, laid back. They're just taking it, we're going to try and outperform, and they went full try hard this time. They practiced day in, day out. No idea what their strats were. We had a chance to talk with some of the other teams, not so much this time. And I mean, they just had such a clean run. Method NA performed excellent. It was a 2-0. But if you're going to compare Method NA versus Free Marcy so far, I mean, Method NA had a couple of sloppy pulls, cost them a bit. Free Marcy was just dominant.
We have compared Method NA and Free Marcy, but now you at home can as well. Let us know in Twitch chat who you're rooting for to take it. Is it going to be North America? Is it going to be Asia Pacific? Hashtag MNA or hashtag FM. And we talk a lot, and really this is just the history of the MDI program. We're always quick to say, practicing 12 hours a day, still lose, and we kind of, it's a tendency for us in the audience to kind of like clown on people occasionally. But I love seeing teams who have kind of said in the past, like, hey, we're not taking it as seriously, like, we're just better and we're just going to win. I love seeing those teams step up and say, hey, we didn't win. We said we would, it didn't pan out that way, we need to change up our approach. And, for Free Marcy, if they have that kind of success, certainly some nod has to be made to the adjustment of attitude, to the adjustment of preparation, and understanding what you have to do against some of the better players in the world.
Yeah, and we've really seen how they've been able to step it up, for example. I mean, we know, right, that Free Marcy is not maining, for example, Blood Decays and Disc Priest on live servers, right? They were originally talking about just running with their mains and having some very awkward kind of compositions going into it, but they put that full focus out onto it. And like you said, setting the tone for 2019, what kind of team do they want to be, and maybe even attracting some future sponsors and stuff like that to this team that has been around for such a long time.
I mean, it's one thing for Marcy to be freed. It's another thing for Marcy to have a job. So certainly that's always something you want to be considering. But don't go anywhere. When we come back, the conclusion to the Mythic Dungeon Invitational All-Stars at BlizzCon is going to be Method NA taking on Free Marcy. Don't go anywhere.